Captain Daniel Harper stood near the large window of his ship, the Horizon. Outside, space was black and endless. Stars dotted the darkness like tiny diamonds. He had been on this mission for 3 months now, exploring the outer edges of human space. It was supposed to be a simple survey mission. Nothing exciting ever happened on survey missions, but today was different. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Kate Morgan, walked up behind him. Her boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. She held a small tablet in her hands. Her face looked worried. She handed him the tablet without saying anything. Daniel took it and started reading. His eyes grew wider with each line. This could not be real, but the data on the screen told him it was. The sensors had found something. A massive ship floating in the empty space between stars. It was not moving. It was just sitting there in the void, silent and dark. Kate finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but steady. She told him the ship was ancient, over 2,000 years old, but somehow the power was still on inside. Not much power, but enough to show that something was still working. Daniel looked at her. He asked the obvious question. Were there any signs of life on board the alien vessel? Kate shook her head. No life signs at all. But then she said something that made Daniel's blood run cold. The ship had responded to their scans. It had sent them a message back. Daniel asked what kind of message. His hands felt suddenly cold. Kate looked uncomfortable. She told him the message was in English. Perfect, clear English. And it was only 3 words long. The message said, "Waiting for Daniel Harper." The tablet almost fell from Daniel's hands. His name. An alien ship that was over 2,000 years old knew his name. That was impossible. It had to be some kind of mistake or trick. He whispered that it could not be possible. There had to be some explanation. Kate told him that the language team had checked everything. They ran every test they could think of. It was not a translation error. It was not some random signal. That ship knew exactly who he was, and it was waiting for him. Daniel turned back to the window and looked at the alien ship on the screen. It was huge. Maybe 10 times bigger than the Horizon. The design was strange. Nothing like human ships with their straight lines and practical shapes. This vessel had curves and flowing shapes. Parts of it seemed to be made of crystal that caught and reflected the light from distant stars. It looked almost alive somehow. After a long moment of silence, Daniel made his decision. He told Kate to prepare a small shuttle. He was going over there to see what this was all about. Kate immediately objected. She said it was too dangerous. They had no idea what was on that ship or why it knew his name. She wanted him to at least wait until they could get more information. But Daniel's mind was made up. He told her that the ship knew his name. It had been waiting for him specifically. He had to find out why. Whatever was on that vessel, it wanted to talk to him. He could not ignore that. The shuttle bay became busy as the crew prepared for the crossing. Marcus Webb, the ship's chief engineer, checked Daniel's spacesuit carefully. He tested every seal twice to make sure nothing would leak. Lisa Chen, who handled all communications, programmed the shuttle's computer with the path to the alien ship. As Daniel put on his helmet, Kate tried one more time. She offered to go with him. She said he did not have to do this alone. Daniel refused gently. He told her no. If something went wrong, the Horizon would need its first officer. Besides, the message had been clear. It was waiting for him, just him. He had to go alone. The journey across the empty space took 20 minutes. 20 long minutes where Daniel heard nothing except the soft hum of the shuttle's engines and his own breathing inside the helmet. The alien ship grew larger and larger in front of him as he got closer. Then something amazing happened. A section of the alien ship's outer wall began to glow. The metal seemed to turn liquid for a moment, and then an opening appeared. It was a docking bay. The ship was opening itself for him, inviting him inside. Daniel guided the shuttle through the opening. The bay was huge and empty. His shuttle looked like a toy in comparison. He landed carefully on the smooth floor. The landing was so gentle that he barely felt it. He sat still for a moment, gathering his courage. Then he stood up slowly and checked his suit one final time. Everything showed green. The suit was working perfectly. He opened the shuttle hatch and stepped out onto the alien ship. The inside of the ship was beautiful. The walls gave off a soft blue light. It pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. His suit sensors told him the air was safe to breathe. But Daniel decided to keep his helmet on anyway. Better to be safe. A long corridor stretched out in front of him. As soon as he took his first step, lights began to turn on along the path. They were showing him the way. The ship was guiding him somewhere. He spoke into his radio, telling the horizon he was inside. The ship seemed to be leading him somewhere specific. Kate's voice came back through the radio. She sounded worried but professional. She told him they were watching all his vital signs. Everything looked normal so far. She told him to be careful. Daniel followed the lights through the alien ship. The rooms he passed were incredible. Some of them seemed wrong somehow, like they existed in more than 3 dimensions. His eyes could not quite understand what he was seeing. Other rooms held strange devices and equipment. He had no idea what any of it was for. After walking for about 10 minutes, the corridor opened up into a massive chamber. The room was so big that Daniel could not see the ceiling. In the very center was a raised platform. Floating above the platform was a sphere of pure light. The light was bright, but it did not hurt to look at. Strangely, the sphere cast no shadow on anything around it. Daniel walked slowly toward the platform. His heart was beating fast. Each step felt heavy. As he got closer, the sphere began to pulse brighter. The light grew stronger and stronger. Then the sphere spoke. A voice filled the entire chamber. It was clear and beautiful. The voice sounded neither male nor female. It spoke in perfect English. The voice welcomed him. It called him by name, Daniel Harper. It said they had waited for such a long time for him to return. So very, very long. Daniel's hand moved to the weapon on his belt. He did not pull it out, but his fingers touched it ready. He found his voice and asked what the sphere meant by return. He told it he had never been here before. This was his first time on this ship. The sphere seemed to laugh, though there was no sound. The light pulsed in a way that felt like amusement. Then it told him something that changed everything. It said he had been here before, not in this lifetime perhaps, but his soul had walked these corridors before. Over 2,000 years ago, and now finally he had come back. Daniel stood frozen in front of the glowing sphere. His mind struggled to understand what he had just heard. The sphere said he had been here before in another life, that his soul was old, much older than the 38 years his body had lived. He told the sphere it was lying. That was impossible. He had been born on Earth. He had memories of his childhood, his parents, his whole life. He knew exactly who he was. The sphere's light grew softer, gentler. It told him that yes, his body was only 38 years old. But the essence of who he was, his soul, was ancient. It had lived many lives. And in one of those lives, thousands of years ago, he had been something very different, something more. Suddenly, the chamber began to change. Images appeared in the air all around Daniel. They were like holograms, but more real. He could almost feel them. The images showed Earth, but not the Earth he knew. This Earth was wild and primitive. There were no cities, no technology, just forests and mountains and oceans. Then ships appeared in the images. Ships like the one he was standing in now. Dozens of them. They came from the stars and landed on the young Earth. Beings emerged from the ships. Some looked like humans, but others were completely alien, strange and beautiful in ways Daniel could not describe. The sphere spoke again. It told him about the architects. That was what they called themselves. They were a group of different species who worked together. Their purpose was to help young civilizations grow, to guide them toward wisdom and peace. They traveled from world to world, planting seeds of knowledge. Daniel watched the images change. He saw the early humans learning from the architects, learning to use tools better, learning to farm and build, learning to work together. The architects did not give humans everything. They just helped them along, guided them, protected them. Then the images showed something that made Daniel's chest tighten. He saw a man. The man did not look like him. Different face, different body, but something about the eyes was familiar. The way he moved, the way he smiled. The sphere told him that this man was him, or rather who he used to be, a human who was chosen by the architects, a human who proved himself worthy and was transformed. He became one of them. He transcended his physical form and joined them in their mission. For hundreds of years, the images showed this man who was Daniel traveled with the architects. He visited countless worlds. He met hundreds of different species. He helped guide them all toward better futures. He was happy. He was fulfilled. He was part of something greater than himself, but then everything changed. Daniel could see it in the images. The light dimmed. The colors became darker. War came. The sphere's voice became sad. It told Daniel about a species the architects had helped long ago, a species called the Void Dwellers. The architects had taught them and guided them, just like they did with everyone else. But the Void Dwellers grew resentful. They felt the architects were holding them back, limiting them. They wanted complete freedom to do whatever they wished, even if it meant hurting others. The Void Dwellers turned on their teachers. They built weapons. They attacked the architects' ships. The images showed terrible battles. Stars exploding, planets burning, ships torn apart in the darkness of space. Daniel felt tears on his face. He did not know why he was crying. These were not his memories. He had never experienced any of this. But somehow deep inside it felt real. It felt like pain he had carried for a very long time. The sphere continued its story. The architects had not wanted to fight back at first. They believed in peace. They thought they could reason with the Void Dwellers, make them understand. But the Void Dwellers did not want understanding. They wanted dominance, power, control. By the time the architects decided to defend themselves, it was too late. Their numbers had fallen. Their ships were destroyed. One by one, they fell to the Void Dwellers' attacks. The images showed Daniel something that broke his heart. He saw himself, his past self, making a choice. The other architects were dying. Their mission was failing. But humanity still had a chance. They were still young, still growing, still full of potential. So the man who would become Daniel made a decision. He chose to leave the architects, to give up his transcendent form, to return to Earth and be reborn as a human. He promised he would come back when humanity was ready, when they had grown enough to take the architects' place in the galaxy, when they could continue the mission of guiding and protecting younger species. The images faded away. Daniel stood alone in the chamber with the glowing sphere. His mind was spinning. He felt dizzy. The story was too big, too impossible. But something deep inside him knew it was true. He asked the sphere why. Why had it waited so long? Why had it waited for him specifically? The sphere pulsed brightly. It told him that he carried something special inside him. The knowledge of the architects. The wisdom they had gathered over millions of years. It was buried deep in his soul, hidden but not lost. With the right help, that knowledge could be awakened. And with that knowledge, humanity could become what the architects once were. Teachers, guardians, helpers. But there was a warning too. The Void Dwellers were still out there, somewhere in the dark spaces between galaxies. They were waiting, watching, looking for new civilizations that might become strong enough to challenge them. Daniel took off his helmet. His hands were shaking. The air in the ship tasted clean and cool. He breathed deeply, trying to calm himself. He told the sphere he did not remember any of this. He was just a ship captain, a regular person. How could he be this important? The sphere's voice was gentle now. It told him that memories could be restored. The knowledge buried in his soul could be awakened. But Daniel had to choose. He could leave right now, go back to his ship, live out his normal life and never know what he once was. Or he could accept what he was being offered. Daniel asked what exactly was being offered. The sphere descended until it was at eye level with him. It told him he would gain the full knowledge of the architects. Technology that could reshape entire worlds. Wisdom that could help all intelligent life find peace instead of war. The ability to guide humanity and other species toward a better future. But he would also gain the responsibility, the weight of making sure the architects' mistakes were never repeated. Daniel's first thought was of his family. His wife Claire was waiting for him back home. His daughter Sophie was 10 years old. His son Jack was 7. They needed their father. They needed him to come home. But he also thought about all the other families. All the billions of humans spreading through space. All the aliens they would meet in the future. All the lives that could be saved or lost based on the choices humanity made in the coming years. He asked the sphere how long this process would take. How long would he be away from his crew? The sphere told him 3 days. The process of awakening his buried memories and knowledge would require 3 days. His crew could monitor him the entire time. They could talk to him. If he changed his mind at any point, the process would stop immediately. Daniel closed his eyes. He thought about everything the sphere had shown him. The ancient Earth, the architects, the war, his past life, the promise he had made to return. Deep in his heart, he knew what he had to do. Maybe he did not remember his past life. Maybe it all seemed impossible. But standing here in this ancient ship, feeling the truth of the sphere's words resonating in his bones, he could not walk away. He opened his eyes and looked at the sphere. He told it he accepted. He would do this. He would remember. He would take on the responsibility. The sphere glowed brighter than ever before. Its light filled the chamber until Daniel could see nothing else. And in that light he heard the sphere speak one final time. It welcomed him home. The first day was like floating in a dream. Daniel lay in a special chamber that the ship prepared for him. The room was comfortable and warm. The glowing sphere stayed nearby, bathing him in light that his instruments could not measure or understand. The light did not hurt. It felt peaceful. Safe. Back on the horizon, Kate and the rest of the crew watched their captain's vital signs on their screens. Every heartbeat, every breath, every brainwave. They tracked it all carefully, ready to pull him out if anything went wrong. Daniel talked to them regularly. He told Kate he was fine. Better than fine, actually. He was seeing things. Amazing things. It was like dreaming while being completely awake. He saw places he had never been before, but somehow they felt familiar. Like coming home after a long journey. Kate asked him what kind of places he was seeing. Her voice held concern and curiosity. Daniel tried to explain. He was seeing worlds, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The architects had not just worked with humanity. They had helped so many different species. He could see their cities, beautiful and strange. He could understand their art, even though it was nothing like human art. He could feel their philosophies, their ways of thinking about the universe. It was overwhelming. But it was also the most beautiful thing he had ever experienced. The second day was much harder. The gentle memories faded away. What came next was difficult and painful. These memories carried weight. They carried sorrow. Daniel saw the war again. But this time he did not just watch it, he felt it. He experienced it as if he was really there. He was there in a way. His past self had been there, had lived through it all. He saw the Void Dwellers attack. He watched civilizations he had helped nurture fall to violence and destruction. He felt the pain of watching species turn on each other, the grief of seeing everything the architects had built fall apart, the desperate, hopeless feeling of knowing they had failed. The worst part was seeing the architects' mistake clearly. They had been too trusting, too gentle, too sure that reason and kindness would always win in the end. They had believed that if they just showed species the right path, everyone would follow it. But they were wrong. Some beings did not want guidance. They wanted power, and they were willing to destroy anyone who stood in their way. On the horizon, Marcus saw Daniel's readings spike on the monitors. He called out to Kate with worry in his voice. The captain's neural patterns were going crazy. His heart rate was elevated. His breathing was irregular. Should they pull him out? Stop the process? Kate opened a channel to Daniel. She asked if he was okay. If he needed them to bring him back, Daniel's voice came back. It sounded strained and tired, but it was determined. He told them no. Do not pull him out. He needed to see this. He needed to understand what went wrong. He needed to know the full truth, not just the good parts. The memories kept coming. Daniel watched as his past self made the final choice. The architects were dying. Their mission was ending in failure, but humanity still had hope. They were still young enough to learn from the architects' mistakes, still flexible enough to adapt, still capable of becoming something better. So he chose to leave, to give up his transcendent form, to return to Earth and wait for the right moment when humanity would be ready, when they would be strong enough to carry on the work but wise enough not to repeat the same errors. As his past self faded back into the cycle of rebirth, Daniel heard the promise echo through time. A promise that reached across 2,000 years. He had said he would return when humanity was ready. And now finally that time had come. The third day brought something different. The painful memories began to settle. They became part of him instead of foreign experiences. The knowledge started to integrate with who Daniel was now. He began to understand how everything fit together. He understood the technology now. The ship's systems made sense to him. He knew how the architects had traveled faster than light without tearing holes in space. He knew how they had communicated across vast distances instantly. He knew how they had lived for thousands of years, their bodies sustained by technology that worked with nature rather than against it. More importantly, he understood the philosophy. The architects had failed because they were too passive. They had trusted too much and protected too little. But the Void Dwellers had become monsters because they had done the opposite. They had taken power without wisdom. They had pursued strength without compassion. Humanity needed to find the balance between these two extremes. They needed to be strong enough to defend themselves and others, but wise enough to know when not to use that strength. They needed to guide other species without controlling them, to help without imposing, to protect without dominating. It was a difficult balance, a narrow path, but Daniel could see it now. He understood what needed to be done. When Daniel finally emerged from the chamber, Kate was waiting for him. She barely recognized the man who stepped out. Not because he looked different. His face was the same. His body was the same. But something had changed in his eyes. They held depth now, ancient knowledge mixed with deep sadness. But also hope. Strong, unshakable hope. Kate spoke hesitantly. She called him Captain, but it came out as a question. Was he still their captain? Was he still Daniel? Daniel smiled. It was his smile. Warm and genuine and completely human. He told Kate he was still himself. Still Daniel Harper. Just more than he had been before. He carried extra memories now. Extra knowledge. But the man she knew was still there. The man who loved his wife and kids. The man who cared about his crew. That person had not gone anywhere. Kate let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. She asked what happens now. What comes next? Daniel looked around the chamber. Then he looked at Kate. He told her they needed to bring the rest of the crew over. Everyone who wanted to learn. The ship would teach them too. The process would be different because they did not have past lives to remember, but they would still gain the knowledge. Everything humanity needed to step forward into the galaxy, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as teachers, as helpers. As guardians, Marcus was the first to volunteer. His engineer's mind was hungry for the new technology. He wanted to know how everything worked. Lisa followed right behind him. She wanted to understand the languages and cultures the architects had encountered. One by one, every member of the crew decided to make the journey across to the alien ship. The ship had enough chambers for everyone. Over the next several weeks, each crew member went through their own transformation. It was different for each person. They did not gain memories like Daniel had, but they gained understanding. Deep fundamental understanding. Marcus learned the mathematics of space travel. Real travel. Not the crude, dangerous methods humanity had been using. He learned how to move through space without damaging it, how to travel faster than light safely. Lisa learned about communication. Not just language, but true understanding between different species. She learned how to build bridges between completely different ways of thinking, how to help species understand each other even when they had nothing in common. The others learned too: biology, medicine, engineering, philosophy, art, every field of knowledge the architects had gathered over millions of years. All of it was shared freely with the crew of the Horizon. Kate was the last one to go through the process. She had wanted to make sure everyone else was safe first. When she finally emerged from her chamber, she found Daniel standing near one of the huge windows. He was looking out at the stars. She walked up beside him quietly. She told him it was beautiful, seeing everything with new understanding, with new eyes. The universe suddenly made sense in ways it never had before. Daniel nodded, but his expression was serious. He told Kate it was also terrifying, because now he knew things, difficult things. He knew which stars had dead civilizations orbiting around them, civilizations that had destroyed themselves or been destroyed by others. He knew which species humanity would meet in the future, which ones would be friends, which ones would be threats. And he knew the Void Dwellers were still out there, waiting in the dark spaces between galaxies, watching, planning. Kate took a deep breath. Then she said they would prepare. Not for war, but for defense. They would protect themselves and protect others. And they would help other species prepare too. Together they would be ready for whatever came. Daniel smiled at her words. He told her that was exactly right. That was the plan. This ship was not just a library of knowledge. It was a factory, a university, a workshop. They could build more ships here, train more people. Within one generation, humanity could be ready for anything the future might bring. Kate looked at him carefully. She said he would lead them. The returned architect. The one who remembered everything, but Daniel shook his head firmly. He told her no. He was just one man with old memories. Humanity would lead itself. He would guide them, teach them, share what he knew. But the choices about the future belonged to everyone, not just him. The future belonged to all of humanity, to all the species they would help, to everyone working together. The glowing sphere had been silent while the crew learned, but now it pulsed gently. Its voice filled the room where Daniel and Kate stood. It told Daniel this was wisdom. This was why they had waited for him. He understood that knowledge without humility was... The hardest part was not learning the architect's knowledge. The hardest part was deciding what to tell Earth, what to tell all of humanity. Daniel sat in the conference room of the Horizon. The ship was now docked permanently with the architect vessel. Around the table sat his senior officers. Kate, Marcus, Lisa, and 3 others. They all had serious expressions on their faces. They were trying to figure out the right way forward. Lisa spoke first. She said if they told Earth everything right away, there would be panic. People would be afraid. They would want to build weapons immediately. They would want to prepare for war with the Void Dwellers. Fear would control their decisions. Marcus disagreed. He said if they told Earth nothing, they would be no better than the architects. They would be making decisions for all of humanity, without asking what humanity wanted. That was wrong. People deserved to know the truth. Kate leaned forward, her hands folded on the table. She said they needed to find a middle path. Be honest about what they found, but present it in a way that focused on opportunity rather than threat. Show people the hope, not just the danger. Daniel had been listening quietly. Now he nodded slowly. He told them they would tell humanity about the architects, about the legacy they left behind. They would offer to share all the knowledge freely. But they would make it clear that knowledge came with responsibility. And yes, they would tell people about the Void Dwellers, not as an immediate danger that would arrive tomorrow, but as a reminder of what humanity must avoid becoming. They spent 2 full days writing the message. Every word was considered carefully. Every sentence was reviewed multiple times. They knew this message would change human history. They could not afford to get it wrong. Finally, the message was ready. They sent it out on every communication channel, from the edge of explored space all the way back to Earth. Every colony, every station, every ship. Everyone would receive it at the same time. Daniel's face appeared on screens across human civilization. Billions of people stopped what they were doing to watch. He began speaking. He told them who he was. Captain Daniel Harper of the exploration vessel Horizon. 3 weeks ago, he said, they had made a discovery that would change everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. Then he explained it all. The alien ship, the architects who had built it, his own strange connection to them through past lives, the knowledge they had gained, the responsibility they now carried, and yes, the challenges that lay ahead. He spoke clearly and honestly. He did not hide the difficult parts. He told them about the Void Dwellers, about the war that had destroyed the architects, about the threat that still existed somewhere in the dark spaces beyond the galaxy. But he also spoke about hope, about possibility, about what humanity could become. He told them they stood at a crossroads. One path was easy but dangerous. They could take the architect's knowledge and use it to make humanity strong. Strong enough to dominate, strong enough to conquer, strong enough to make sure no one could ever hurt them. But that path led to becoming like the Void Dwellers. It led to cruelty and isolation. There was another path, a harder path but a better one. They could use this knowledge to lift others up, to help other species grow and thrive, to be guardians and teachers like the architects had tried to be. But to do it better, to learn from their mistakes, to be strong enough to protect but wise enough to know when protection became control. Daniel looked directly into the camera. His voice was steady and sincere. He told humanity he was not ordering them to do anything. He was not commanding them. He could not do that. He was asking them to think carefully about what kind of species they wanted to be, what kind of legacy they wanted to leave for future generations. He told them the architect vessel was opening its doors. Anyone who wanted to learn was welcome. They would build more ships, more academies, more places to study and grow. They would share everything they discovered, but they would do it slowly, carefully, making sure that wisdom grew alongside power, that compassion grew alongside strength. Then Daniel said something that resonated across all of human space. He said the stars were no longer just a frontier to be conquered. They were a community to be joined, and humanity was finally ready to take its place in that community. The response was immediate. Messages flooded in from every corner of human civilization. Thousands of messages, then millions. The communication systems could barely handle the traffic. Some people were afraid. They questioned whether an alien intelligence should be trusted. They worried about losing human independence. They wanted guarantees that this was not a trick or trap. Others were excited. They saw the possibilities. The chance to learn. The chance to explore. The chance to become something greater than what they were. But most people fell somewhere in between. They were cautiously hopeful. They appreciated that Daniel had given them a choice rather than making decisions for them. They were grateful that humanity was being offered this inheritance instead of having it imposed on them. The Earth Council held an emergency session. Representatives from every colony and nation gathered. They debated for 3 straight days. The arguments were passionate. Some wanted to accept immediately. Others wanted to reject the offer entirely. Most wanted to proceed carefully. In the end, they reached a decision. They would send representatives to study with the architects, scientists, engineers, philosophers, artists, and leaders. They would begin slowly integrating the new knowledge into human society. They would establish strict rules about how the technology could be used. They would make sure it benefited everyone, not just the powerful. More importantly, they agreed to Daniel's suggestion about reaching out to other species. Humanity had already met several alien races during their expansion into space. The Tarvans, who were gentle and philosophical. The Korath, who were warriors but had chosen peace. The Sylvan, who were artists and dreamers. All of them would be invited to learn from the architects too. Kate stood beside Daniel as they watched the first transport ships arrive. The ships carried scientists and diplomats from Earth, hundreds of people eager to learn, ready to begin humanity's transformation. Kate observed that Daniel was building a new coalition, a new version of what the architects had been. Daniel shook his head firmly. He told her it was not just him building this. It was all of them. Humanity as a whole. All the species they would work with. Everyone together. That was the only way it would work. That was the only way it could succeed. The glowing sphere appeared beside them. Its light was warm and gentle. It spoke to Daniel. It said the architects would be proud. Humanity had not just accepted their legacy. They had improved on it. The architects had guided alone, thinking they knew best. Humanity would guide together, learning from everyone they met. Daniel felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The responsibility was still there. It would always be there. But now it was shared among millions of capable hands. He was not alone in this. None of them were alone. His personal communicator beeped. A private message was coming through. It was from Earth, from his home. From Claire. He opened the message. Claire's face appeared on the small screen. She was smiling. That beautiful smile he had fallen in love with years ago. She told him she had watched his broadcast. The whole thing. She said the kids had watched too. Now Sophie and Jack were running around the house telling everyone their dad was an ancient alien. They kept asking when he was coming home. Daniel laughed out loud. The sound echoed through the chamber. It felt good to laugh. It reminded him that despite everything he had learned, despite all the ancient memories and cosmic responsibilities, he was still human. Still a husband and father. Still someone who loved and was loved in return. He told Claire to tell the kids he would be home soon. Very soon. And when he got there, he would have a lot to teach them. Not just about ancient aliens and cosmic mysteries, but about responsibility, about compassion, about working together, about being part of something bigger than yourself, about being human at its very best. Claire's smile grew wider. She told him she loved him. She said she was proud of him. Then she said something that made his heart swell. She said she always knew he was destined for something important. She just never imagined it would be quite this important. Daniel told her he loved her too. More than anything. He promised he would be home as soon as he could. When the message ended, Daniel stood there for a moment. Just breathing. Just being. Around him, the architect vessel hummed with new life. Students were arriving. Teachers were preparing. A whole new chapter of history was beginning. But for now, in this quiet moment, Daniel Harper was just a man who missed his family, who wanted to go home, who looked forward to teaching his children how to be kind in a vast and sometimes frightening universe. The ancient architect with the weight of ages on his shoulders, and the simple human with love in his heart. Both existing in the same person, both equally important, both equally real. That balance, Daniel realized, was the answer. That was what the architects had been missing. That was what humanity could offer. The ability to be cosmic and personal at the same time, to care about entire civilizations while still loving individual people, to think about the fate of the galaxy while still making time for bedtime stories. 5 years had passed since that first discovery, 5 years since Daniel Harper had walked onto an ancient alien ship and learned he was more than he seemed. The universe had changed in those 5 years. Humanity had changed, and so had Daniel. The Architect Academy now floated in orbit around Earth. The original vessel had grown. Using technology that had been dormant for thousands of years, the ship had extended itself. New structures had grown from the central core like branches from a tree. Crystalline towers reached out into space. Each one was a classroom, a laboratory, a workshop, a place where beings from across the galaxy came to learn. Daniel walked through the wide corridors. His footsteps echoed softly. Students passed him going the other direction. Some were human. Young men and women from Earth and the colonies. But many were not human. Three-jointed Tarvans moved gracefully on their multiple limbs. Korith with their scaled skin that shimmered in different colors when they were excited. Sylvan whose bodies seemed almost transparent like they were made of mist and light. The diversity was beautiful. So many different forms of life. So many different ways of thinking. All of them learning together, working together, growing together, and it was working. Despite all the doubts and fears at the beginning, it was actually working. Kate found him in the observation garden. This was a special place they had created together. A large room with a transparent dome showing the stars above. Inside grew plants from a dozen different worlds. Earth flowers next to Tarvan moss, Korith crystal trees beside Sylvan light vines. All of them thriving together in carefully maintained environments. Kate had changed too over the years. Her hair was gray now at the temples. Lines had formed around her eyes, but those eyes still sparkled with the same determination and intelligence Daniel had always valued. She told him the first graduating class was ready. 2,000 students had completed their training. They had learned everything the architects knew. All the technology, all the philosophy, all the wisdom gathered over millions of years. Now they were ready to go out into the galaxy and teach others. Daniel asked her how she felt about it. Sending them out into the unknown. Kate smiled. She said she felt terrified and hopeful at the same time. It was the same feeling she had when her daughter Sophie took her first steps as a baby. Pride mixed with fear, joy mixed with worry, love mixed with the knowledge that you had to let go and trust. Daniel smiled at the mention of Sophie. His daughter was here at the academy too. She was 16 now. She had chosen to study xenobiology, the science of alien life. She had a natural gift for understanding how different species thought and lived. Jack, his son, was 13. He had followed Marcus into engineering. The boy had inherited his mentor's love of figuring out how things worked. After a moment of comfortable silence, Kate spoke again. Her voice was quieter now. She asked about the Void Dwellers. They still had not found any sign of them in 5 years of searching. Daniel's expression grew more serious. He told her the Void Dwellers were definitely out there. The ship's long-range sensors had picked up strange readings near the edge of the galaxy. Movement patterns that matched what he remembered from his ancient memories, but the Void Dwellers were not approaching. Not yet. They were staying in the dark spaces beyond the rim. Watching. Waiting. Kate asked if he thought they were watching humanity. Studying them, Daniel nodded. He told her he knew they were watching. The Void Dwellers wanted to see what humanity would do. Would they repeat the architect's mistakes? Would they become weak and passive? Or would they become like the Void Dwellers themselves, cruel and dominating? The answer to those questions would determine what happened next. Kate asked what he thought. What path was humanity taking? Daniel looked out at the stars through the garden dome. He told her humanity was charting a different course. A new path. The architects had been teachers, but not students. They thought they had all the answers. The Void Dwellers had been students who refused to keep learning. They thought they knew better than everyone else. But humanity was trying to be both, to teach and to learn, to share knowledge while also accepting knowledge from others, to be humble and strong at the same time. It was not perfect. There were still arguments and disagreements. Some humans wanted to use the technology for military power. Some alien species were suspicious of human intentions. There were cultural misunderstandings and political tensions. But everyone was trying. Everyone was working toward the same goal. The graduation ceremony was held in the Great Hall. This massive space could hold 10,000 beings comfortably. Today it was completely full. Representatives from every human colony had come. Delegates from the Tarvans, Korath, and Sylvan filled the seats. Even some species humanity had only recently met were there. The Quallen, who lived in the clouds of gas giants. The Mothers, ancient beings who communicated through shared dreams. Daniel stood at the podium looking out at everyone. Thousands of faces, young and old, human and alien, all united by learning, all committed to building a better future. He began his speech. He told them the architects had waited 2,000 years for someone to return. They had waited for a sign that humanity was ready to carry on their work. But he had learned something important over these 5 years. The architects had not been waiting just for him. They had been waiting for all of them. Every person in this hall, every species represented here. He told them that each of them now carried the legacy, not because of ancient memories or mystical connections, but because they had chosen it. They had chosen to learn, to grow, to take responsibility for making the universe a better place. That choice was what mattered. That choice was what made them worthy. The original architects had failed because they tried to guide the galaxy alone. They thought they knew best. But this new generation would succeed because they understood something the architects never did. They understood that every species had something to teach. Every individual had value. Wisdom came from working together, not from one group deciding for everyone else. Daniel looked at the graduating students in the front rows. He told them they were the new architects, not replacing what came before, but building on it, learning from both the successes and the failures of the past, and the future they would create would be greater than anything the old coalition had ever dreamed possible. The applause that followed was thunderous. Humans clapped. Tarvans created harmonic sounds with their vocal chambers. Korath struck their chest plates in a traditional show of respect. Sylvan glowed brighter. The sound and light filled the hall and seemed to echo out into space itself. Later, after the ceremony ended and the celebrations began, Daniel found himself back in the central chamber, the place where everything had started 5 years ago. The glowing sphere still floated above its pedestal, but it seemed dimmer now, quieter, content. Daniel spoke to the sphere. He told it that its purpose was fulfilled. It had waited for him to return. He had returned. It had shared its knowledge. The knowledge was spreading across the galaxy now. The sphere could rest. It had earned that rest. The sphere pulsed gently. Its voice was soft and warm. It told Daniel that perhaps it would rest. But not yet. Not for a while. It wanted to stay and watch. To witness what humanity and their allies would accomplish. To see the future unfold. Not to guide or control. Just to observe and appreciate. Daniel asked the question that had been on his mind for years. Would the Void Dwellers come? Would they attack? The sphere was quiet for a moment. Then it answered. Eventually, yes. They would come. They always did when they sensed a rising power in the galaxy, when they felt threatened by others becoming strong. But by the time they arrived, humanity and their allies would be ready. Not just ready to fight, though they would be capable of defending themselves. More importantly, they would be ready to show the Void Dwellers another way, to demonstrate that strength and wisdom could exist together. That power did not have to mean domination. Daniel asked what would happen if the Void Dwellers refused to listen, if they chose violence anyway. The sphere told him that if that happened, they would do what had to be done. They would defend themselves and protect others. But they would do it together, as a coalition of equals, not as one species ruling over others. That unity, that cooperation, was what the architects had lacked. It was why humanity would succeed where the architects had failed. Daniel stood in silence. He felt the weight of 2 lifetimes pressing on him. The memories of who he had been, the responsibilities of who he was now, but he also felt something else. Hope. Real, genuine hope for the future. His family was waiting for him at home. Claire had moved to the Academy Station 2 years ago. She taught history now, helping students understand the mistakes of the past so they could avoid them in the future. Sophie and Jack would be there. The work at the Academy would continue whether Daniel was there every moment or not. The knowledge was spreading. The students were becoming teachers. The cycle was growing and expanding on its own now. The ship had waited for him to return. And he had. But now the waiting was over. The work would go on. But it would go on through thousands of hands, not just his. As Daniel turned to leave the chamber, the sphere pulsed one final time. Its voice followed him, warm and grateful. It thanked him. Thanked him for 10 years after Daniel Harper first stepped onto the ancient ship, the galaxy was a different place. The change had not happened overnight. It had been slow and careful, but it had been real. Humanity now had 17 Architect Academy stations scattered across their territory. Each one was teaching thousands of students every year. But more importantly, other species had started building their own academies. The Tarvins had 3. The Korath had 5. Even the newly contacted Quallen had begun construction on their first academy in the clouds of their homeworld. The knowledge was spreading. Not being hoarded or controlled. Not being used as a weapon or tool of dominance. It was being shared freely with anyone who wanted to learn. That generosity was creating something unexpected. Trust. Real trust between species who had once been strangers. Daniel sat in his office at the main academy. His hair was mostly gray now. Lines marked his face. He was 48 years old, though sometimes he felt much older. The weight of ancient memories never quite left him. But he had learned to carry that weight without letting it crush him. A message appeared on his desk screen. It was from the Deep Space Monitoring Station, the one they had built specifically to watch for any signs of the Void Dwellers. Daniel's heart rate increased slightly as he opened the message. After 10 years of silence, something had finally changed. The Void Dwellers had been spotted. Not approaching aggressively, not attacking, just moving closer. They had crossed into the outer edges of known space. They were still far away, weeks of travel even at the fastest speeds. But they were coming. Daniel immediately called an emergency council meeting. Within hours, representatives from every species in the coalition had gathered. Some came in person, others appeared as holograms transmitted across vast distances. But everyone came. This was too important to miss. Daniel stood before the council. He showed them the sensor data. He explained what the Void Dwellers were and what they had done to the architects. He told them honestly that this could be the greatest test they had ever faced. The reaction was mixed. Some wanted to prepare for war immediately, build weapons, gather fleets, show strength. Others wanted to try to hide or run, avoid confrontation at all costs. Neither approach felt right to Daniel. He raised his hand for silence. When the room quieted, he spoke. He told them they would do neither. They would not hide. They would not attack first. Instead, they would show the Void Dwellers what the architects never could. They would demonstrate what a true coalition looked like, what cooperation between equals could achieve. They would send a delegation to meet the Void Dwellers. Not to beg or threaten, but to talk, to offer them the same thing they had offered everyone else. Knowledge, partnership, a place in the growing community of species working together. A Korath general objected strongly. He said the Void Dwellers had destroyed the architects. They were dangerous, evil. Why would anyone offer them friendship? Daniel understood the concern. He told the general that the Void Dwellers had become what they were because they felt controlled and limited. The architects had meant well, but they had been too certain they knew the right path. They had guided without listening. Maybe, just maybe, if the Void Dwellers were treated as equals rather than students or enemies, they might respond differently. A Tarvin elder spoke up. She said that if this approach failed, if the Void Dwellers attacked, they needed to be ready to defend themselves and each other. Peace was good, but survival was necessary. Daniel agreed completely. They would prepare defenses. Every species would contribute. Ships, technology, fighters. If the Void Dwellers chose violence, the coalition would defend itself. Together. but they would try peace first. They owed it to themselves and to the memory of the architects to at least try. The council voted. It was not unanimous. Some still disagreed with the approach, but the majority agreed to try Daniel's plan. They would send a delegation, they would prepare defenses, and they would hope for the best while planning for the worst. 3 weeks later, the delegation departed. Daniel led it personally. Kate came with him, as did representatives from every major species in the coalition. They traveled in a specially built ship, one that showed off the best of what they had achieved together. Human engineering, Tarvan life support systems, Korth weapons that they hoped they would not need to use, Sylvan navigation that could move through space more smoothly than anything before. The journey took 5 days, 5 days of preparation and anxiety. Daniel spent much of that time talking to the sphere. The ancient intelligence had agreed to come along. It remembered the void dwellers from before. It could help communicate if things went well. It could help defend if things went badly. On the 5th day, they arrived at the meeting point, a neutral location in empty space, and there, waiting for them, was a void dweller vessel. It was massive, dark, covered in what looked like black metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It looked dangerous, built for war. Daniel opened a communication channel. He spoke clearly and calmly. He identified himself and his delegation. He said they came in peace but were prepared to defend themselves if necessary. He asked if the void dwellers were willing to talk. For a long moment there was only silence. Then a response came. The voice that spoke was deep and layered, like multiple beings talking at once. It asked why they should talk, why they should trust species that were allied with the architect's legacy. Daniel took a breath. He told them the truth. He said he carried the memories of an architect. He knew what the architects had done wrong, how they had failed. He and his allies were not trying to repeat those mistakes. They were trying to build something better, something the architects should have built from the beginning. A true coalition where everyone had an equal voice. He told the void dwellers that they were invited to join, not as conquered enemies, not as students being taught, but as partners, as equals. Their knowledge and experience would be valued. Their concerns would be heard. They would have a voice in shaping the future just like everyone else. Another long silence followed. Then the void dweller ship began to move. It came closer. Weapon ports were visible but not active. The ship stopped at a neutral distance. Neither threatening nor retreating, the voice spoke again. It said the void dwellers had been watching. For 10 years they had observed how humanity and their allies used the architect's knowledge. They had expected weapons, conquest, empire building. Instead, they had seen sharing, cooperation, growth. It had confused them, made them uncertain. They had spent thousands of years believing that strength meant domination, that freedom meant taking what you wanted. But watching the coalition, they had started to question those beliefs. Maybe there was another way. The Void Dweller representative said they would send observers, not warriors, not spies, but genuine observers who would come to the academies and learn, who would see for themselves if this coalition was real or just another trick. If it proved to be real, if the cooperation was genuine, then perhaps the Void Dwellers would reconsider their isolation. Daniel felt relief wash through him. It was not complete trust, not friendship, but it was a start, a door opening instead of closing. He told the Void Dwellers their observers would be welcomed, protected, treated with the same respect as any other species. The meeting ended peacefully. The Void Dweller ship departed. The delegation returned home with cautious optimism. They had not made peace. Not really, but they had avoided war. They had started a conversation. That was more than the architects had ever achieved. Back at the academy, Daniel stood once more in the central chamber. The sphere floated before him, glowing softly. He told it that the waiting was truly over now. The Void Dwellers were no longer an abstract threat. They were real. They were here. But instead of enemies, they might become something else. The sphere pulsed warmly. It said this was beyond what it had hoped for. The architects had failed to reach the Void Dwellers. But humanity and their allies had done what seemed impossible. They had opened a door that had been closed for millennia. Daniel asked if the sphere would finally rest now. Its mission was complete. More than complete. The sphere's light flickered in a way that seemed like laughter. It said perhaps soon, but not quite yet. It wanted to see how the story ended. Or rather, how this chapter ended, because the story would never truly end. Life would continue. Species would rise and fall. New challenges would emerge. But the foundation was laid now. The pattern was set. Cooperation instead of conquest. Wisdom alongside strength. That pattern would endure. Daniel left the chamber and walked home through the familiar corridors. Claire was waiting with dinner prepared. Sophie was back from her research expedition studying a newly discovered species. Jack was working on plans for a new type of ship engine. His family, his normal, beautiful, ordinary family, who also happened to be part of something cosmic. As they sat together eating and talking about their days, Daniel felt a deep sense of peace. The ancient ship had waited 2,000 years for him to return, and he had returned. He had fulfilled that ancient promise. But more importantly, he had helped create something new, something better than what had been lost. The architect's legacy would live on, not through one person or one species, but through thousands of beings working together, learning,